Who won the 2020 election?
The person who became president in January 2021 was when Congress certified.
In other words, you're not going to answer. You're going to give me the same rote, rehearsed answer, which frankly makes you look ridiculous, if not pathetic. And I'll ask you another question, give you an opportunity maybe to be more forthcoming to this committee. Who won the popular vote in the 2020 election?
As I was just saying, the popular vote is not something that's contemplated by the
Constitution. Asking you who won it. As a member of the Court of Appeals, you are responsible for looking to the facts as well as the law, and I'm asking you to look at the facts here and give me a straight answer. Who won the popular vote in the 2020 election?
In January 2021 was when Congress counted the Electoral College votes and certified Joe Biden as the president.
So you're not going to answer my question. You know, I would have thought, here you are as a nominee. I recognize the anxiety that someone in your position may feel, the fear that the President of the United States may be watching, but you're in a pretty secure position. As a member of the court with lifetime tenure, you're in an indisputably secure position. If you don't have the courage now to state your independent judgment on a clear factual issue, I don't know how the United States Senate can confirm you as a member of one of the most powerful courts in the country. Let me ask you finally, did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election?
A sitting senator just called a federal judicial nominee ridiculous and pathetic to his face, on the record, in the United States Senate. Senator Richard Blumenthal did not reach for a talking point. He reached a verdict. Justin Smith, Donald Trump's hand-picked nominee for the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals, sat across from that committee and refused to say out loud that Joe Biden won the 2020 election. 3 times he was asked. 3 times he buried the answer in procedural language about Electoral College certification. Blumenthal had seen enough. What you just watched is the moment that tells you everything you need to know about who Justin Smith is and what this confirmation is really about.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Smith, you signed an amicus brief in December of 2020 supporting an effort to dispute the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. I've been asking all of the nominees about who won the 2020 election. As you may know, I understand you may have been asked already this morning. I want to hear it for myself. Who won the popular vote in the 2020 election?
You're right, Senator. I have been asked that by one of your colleagues already, and as I explained, the popular vote is not part of the Article 2 or the 12th Amendment. There's an electoral college that meets in December of an election year for president, and that gathers to cast the electoral votes.
Who won the 2020 election?
The person who became president in January 2021 was when Congress certified.
In other words, you're not going to answer. You're going to give me the same rote, rehearsed answer, which frankly makes you look ridiculous, if not pathetic. And I'll ask you another question, give you an opportunity maybe to be more forthcoming to this committee. Who won the popular vote in the 2020 election?
As I was just saying, the popular vote is not something that's contemplated by the Constitution.
I'm asking you who won it. As a member of the Court of Appeals, you are responsible for looking to the facts as well as the law. Granted, facts found by the trial court. And I'm asking you to look at the facts here and give me a straight answer. Who won the popular vote in the 2020 election?
In January 2021 was when Congress counted the Electoral College votes and certified Joe Biden as the president.
So you're not going to answer my question. You know, I would have thought, here you are as a nominee. I recognize the anxiety that someone in your position may feel, the fear that the President of the United States may be watching. But you're in a pretty secure position. As a member of the court with lifetime tenure, you're in an indisputably secure position. If you don't have the courage now to state your independent judgment on a clear factual issue, I don't know how the United States Senate can confirm you as a member of one of the most powerful courts in the country. Let me ask you finally, did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election?
As I said a moment ago, Senator, when Congress counted the Electoral College votes in January 2021, Joe Biden was certified as president.
Let's try another topic. Was the United States Capitol attacked on January 6th, 2021?
I want to be very careful on the language that I use, Senator, because there are cases that have been filed in the Eighth Circuit where the characterization of that day has been central to the case. And as a judicial nominee, I don't want to prejudge any of those cases that might come before me. I believe
Have you seen video footage of that attack?
I've seen the news reports from that day, yes, Senator.
And what did you see in those videos?
I think what the Supreme Court in the three cases that they have handled that have issues related to that day, the Trump versus Anderson case out of Colorado, the Trump versus United States case that I was privileged to handle.
Did you see people punching Capitol police officers? They're the ones outside this hearing room protecting us. Did you see the violent attackers punching, kicking, beating Capitol police officers?
I want to be very clear that I condemn violence on that day and every day, and I'm very grateful for the men and women of law enforcement.
And you saw them attacked on that day, did you not?
I believe the language that the Supreme Court has used in the three cases that I just mentioned is that there was a breach of the Capitol.
Did you see people throwing things at those officers and at the Capitol?
Senator, as I said, I condemn all the violence that occurred on that day and that has occurred on other days as well.
Would you agree with me that what happened on that day was a violent mob attacking the Capitol? You've seen the videos.
I have seen the videos, yes, Senator.
You would agree?
I will say what I've said several times now, that I condemn the violence, and I would use the language of the Supreme Court in those three cases, the Trump versus United States.
I really regret that you don't have the grit to stand up and speak out on an issue of such fundamental importance, and that you are, in effect, intimidated by the remote prospect that the President of the United States may take umbrage and withdraw your nomination. If you don't have the courage to tell this committee the truth, you don't deserve to be on the bench. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hirono.
Thank you. I asked the following two initial questions of all nominees coming before any of the committees on which I sit to ensure the fitness of the nominee to serve. So I will ask you the following two questions. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement relating to this kind of conduct?
No.
Mr. Smith, on July 30th, 2024, you wrote a post on Breitbart endorsing a Missouri Attorney General candidate. Do you recall that post?
I do, Senator.
So in that post, you wrote, quote, Republican attorneys general are critical in the fight against the radical left. We need true conservatives to defeat the abortion industrial complex, the lawlessness plaguing blue cities, and the woke ideology invading our schools, end quote. Can you define the word woke?
Senator, I was very proud to support my friend who was running in that election. That was a piece of political advocacy, and as I was explaining to one of your colleagues earlier, the partisan views or political activity I've had before would play no bearing on my role as a judge.
Well, you're not responding to my question. Can you define for me what constitutes woke ideology? You wrote it. You meant something. I'd just like you to tell us what you meant by that.
Yeah, Senator, in the course of a political campaign, that was a piece that I put out in support of my friend. But as a judicial nominee, I don't think it's appropriate for me to start commenting on political views because as a judge, I would not be applying those partisan or personal views while I was on the bench.
Well, the thing is that this whole idea of woke ideology and DEI, the president has issued an executive order telling all of his administrative agencies to eliminate any support of DEI. And so you're going to get cases that use terms like woke or DEI, et cetera. And so I think it would be good for us to know what you mean by what you wrote. And you're not going to respond. So, okay, there you go. You've been asked a number of questions by a number of my colleagues about who won the 2020 election, and you testified today that it is the Electoral College that matters in determining who is the president. So the House and Senate was in the process of certifying the electoral votes on January 6th. Do you acknowledge that rioters on January 6th sought to stop this process to prevent Joe Biden from being the president? That's a yes or no question.
So I understand that the counting of electoral votes was interrupted on January 6th. I want to be very careful in getting beyond too much farther beyond that because there is still active litigation.
I think it's pretty clear what the rioters' intents were, and in fact, if you don't want to, you won't answer that straightforward question. I have another one. Do you also acknowledge that a number of these rioters, some 1,500 or so of them, were convicted, and that President Trump pardoned them? Do you acknowledge that fact? Yes or no?
I think that is what happened, Senator.
So you represented. I'm glad that you actually acknowledged a factual question that he pardoned all these rioters who were very intent on beating up our police here and trying to stop the counting of the Electoral College. So, Mr. Smith, you have represented President Trump in multiple lawsuits in which he has been found liable for defaming and committing sexual battery against E. Jean Carroll. In these cases, you represented the president in his personal capacity. If a case comes before you in which President Trump's personal interests are heavily implicated, will you recuse yourself?
Senator, I've been very proud to represent the president.
Well, will you recuse yourself?
I will recuse from any case I've been personally involved in. For any other case, I would consult the judicial canons and the appropriate recusal rules. I may need to consult with my colleagues.
Well, considering the kind of representation that you've provided President Trump, you do cite the canons of ethics, and the Code of Conduct for United States judges requires a judge to disqualify himself, quote, in a proceeding in which the judge's impartiality might reasonably be questioned, end quote. I would say that in any case involving President Trump's personal interests, you should recuse yourself because it is very clear where your loyalties lie.
What you just watched was not a stumble. It was a reveal. Justin Smith sat in front of the United States Senate Judiciary Committee auditioning for a lifetime appointment to one of the most powerful courts in the country. And he could not bring himself to say that Joe Biden won the 2020 presidential election. Not because he doesn't know the answer. He knows exactly what the answer is. Every person in that room knows what the answer is. Smith refused because answering honestly would have meant stepping even 1 inch away from Donald Trump, the man who nominated him, the man he has personally represented in court, the man whose legal battles Smith has been fighting for years. That is not a judicial temperament. That is a loyalty test, and Smith passed it with flying colors for the wrong team. Senator Richard Blumenthal saw through it immediately. When Smith retreated for the third time into his scripted line about Congress certifying electoral votes, Blumenthal named what was happening in plain language. "You are going to give me the same rote, rehearsed answer that frankly makes you look ridiculous, if not pathetic." That sentence matters. Not because it was harsh, but because it was accurate. Smith had spent the entire morning performing the role of a neutral, impartial jurist while simultaneously being the sitting personal attorney of the president who nominated him. He represented Trump in the E. Jean Carroll defamation and sexual battery cases. He signed an amicus brief in Texas versus Pennsylvania in December 2020, an explicit legal effort to overturn the election results in multiple states. He published a piece on Breitbart in July 2024, calling on true conservatives to defeat the abortion industrial complex and the woke ideology invading American schools. And then he sat in that chair and told Senator Hirono he could not define the word woke because it would not be appropriate to comment on political views as a judicial nominee. That is the double life Hirono and Blumenthal exposed. Not a rumor, not an inference. His own words, his own record, read back to him line by line while he refused to answer for any of it. Hirono pressed him on whether he would recuse himself from any case involving Trump's personal interests, given that he has literally been on Trump's personal legal payroll. Smith said he would only recuse from cases he had been personally involved in, and for everything else he would consult the canons. The judicial canons he cited require a judge to disqualify himself in any proceeding in which his impartiality might reasonably be questioned. A man who represented Donald Trump in personal lawsuits, who signed briefs to overturn Trump's 2020 loss, who published political advocacy on Breitbart on Trump's behalf, is now asking to be trusted as a neutral arbiter on a federal appeals court that will almost certainly hear cases touching Trump's interests. That is not a gray area. Here is what matters beyond this hearing room. The Eighth Circuit covers 7 states and handles hundreds of cases every year touching voting rights, federal agency power, immigration, and civil liberties. A lifetime appointment means Justin Smith could be ruling on cases that shape American law for the next 30 years. The senators questioning him will not be there. The cameras will not be there. The moment Blumenthal called pathetic will be a footnote. What will remain is the judge. Blumenthal said it directly at the end of his questioning. If you don't have the courage to tell this committee the truth, you don't deserve to be on the bench. Watch this committee. Watch the vote. The confirmation of Justin Smith to the Eighth Circuit is a decision that will outlast every news cycle and every hearing. If you think accountability in that hearing room actually matters, you already know what to do. Share this. The people who need to see it probably won't go looking for it themselves.